So, where and when were you born?
7th of December 2000 in Sydney, Australia.
Hmm. And you're a Sagittarian, right?
Yes.
And are you adventurous and like to travel and a straight shooter?
Um, yeah, I definitely like to travel. Um, yeah, I suppose so. I don't know. I've never really thought about it.
Okay. What's your birth order? Do you have siblings?
No, I'm the only one, only child.
Interesting. That's been true for other people as well. Um, and where are you in school now?
Just started second year uni
Uh-huh. At where? University of
at University of Sydney. Yeah.
Yeah. And what is your field of study? What are you majoring in?
I'm majoring in environmental studies and French.
Très bien fait. Ça va. Pourquoi le
Oui.
français?
I'm a beginner, so I'm not very good at French. I also do German, and I actually speak German currently, but yes,
So
my French
good.
is not very good.
So good. How? Why you're interested in German and French?
I did German in school, and I guess I really enjoy learning languages, and yeah, so I just thought French is a very kind of versatile language that is used all around the world in lots of scenarios, so I figured it was a good complement to German.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you my French around the world story, if you don't mind. I was in Moscow as a tourist, and I was on a bus, and I realized that I could not read any of the street signs, and I had no idea how to get to my hotel. And there were some African students on the bus, and they could speak French. So I said, "S'il vous plaît, où est l'hôtel des amis? Where's the Friendship Hotel?" And they told me where to get off, and they saved the day. But without the French, I would still be driving around.
Languages are always useful.
So I'm interested in how Australians came to Australia because it's not a very old country, just like the U.S. isn't. Where did your ancestors come from and why? Were they penal prisoners?
So on my dad's side, my family's from Bangladesh, and so my dad was born in Bangladesh, and that he moved to Australia when he was very little because my grandfather was a geologist, and so he basically applied to come to either Canada or Australia to work as a geologist, and he was offered a job in Australia. So they came, yeah, when my dad was little. And my mum's side of the family is Irish, but I'm not exactly sure why they came to Australia. I believe my mum's grandmother was born in Ireland. Um, yes, why they came, I'm not really sure.
There's a really interesting American TV show called Your Roots or something, and I don't know if you've seen it, but he found that people know very little about their ancestors, and they have these amazing stories. So there were like movie stars with the Irish background, and they came to Virginia as debtors or no, as prisoners, and the Brits wanted to get them out of England because this guy received stolen property, and that's how he came. People when you're poor, it's understandable that you steal bread or whatever they did.
Yeah.
So what got you interested in climate change? How did you start thinking, I got to do something?
Um, I'm not exactly sure. I didn't have like one kind of moment that creates a really good story or something. I guess I was always interested in, well, I guess I always just had that care for the environment. I don't know, it's just like um, when I was little, I don't know, it was just something spoken about that you've got to care for the environment and care about what happens to the environment and what humans are doing to it. Um, and but I guess when I was younger, it was sort of the story that was told was a bit like, yeah, so there's this thing called global warming, and it's really bad for polar bears, say. And so when I was little, I think, oh, poor polar bears or whatever. You'd see images of like, a polar bear stranded on a piece of ice somewhere and it couldn't get food because the ice had all melted up, and people would think, oh, that's terrible. But I guess I slowly realized, or was slowly learnt, that this wasn't just going to affect polar bears, as terrible and, you know, atrocious that is, but that this is going to affect humans and humanity. Not that that's necessarily more important, but I guess it means that people are going to suffer, and how can we possibly not do something about that? Yeah, I guess it was a kind of slow slope from polar bears to the climate emergency, as I understand it now, as something that's hugely threatening in my lifetime, and already for lots of people.
And that was part of science classes or whatever all the way through school, sounds like.
Yeah, so when I look back, I'm not actually sure how much it was spoken about at school, to be honest. I don't remember. I mean, lots of people have these stories. Oh, you know, I saw this documentary in my science class about plastic in the ocean or something. I'm not sure I really had that sort of experience. I guess it was just something I spoke about in my home. I'm not sure. I mean, it was definitely mentioned at school, but I didn't have that sort of aha moment, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And could you say a word about the recent, everybody in the world who's at all literate knows about the bushfires in Australia, and then the drought, and followed by floods and terrible air pollution. It kind of sounds like, oh, this is a new thing, but this has been happening in Australia. It's just worse now this year. Why has it gotten so much international attention?
It's definitely the worst fire. It was the worst fire season on record. I think both by just the literal amount of hectares of land that were burnt, and also the animal death toll as a result of that. So numbers have been thrown around: 1 billion, 2 billion animals, and that nothing on that sort of scale has happened before. I mean, every year there are fires. That is true, and you know, I've had family that have evacuated in previous fires. I know people have lost their houses in previous fires, but nothing has ever happened on this scale ever before. And I think the toll on our firefighting service, on just the pure number of people having to evacuate, number of people affected, number of houses lost, is just off the scale in comparison. And then, of course, there was the smoke as well, which we've never experienced anything like that before. I mean, previous years, if there was a fire perhaps in the Blue Mountains near Sydney, you could smell it in the air a little bit, maybe for a day, but nothing. I mean, it was just incomprehensible, the smoke that Sydney and Melbourne received, and other areas as well. Nothing ever like that has ever happened before.
No, it was like fog or something. You could barely see ahead of you, and everybody was wearing masks, like some kind of plague.
And you couldn't breathe. You really, you could taste it.
Did they shut down university and schools, or what did they do to protect people from breathing that?
Well, it was over our holidays, the big summer holidays in Australia. So definitely unis weren't back. I think towards the end they were holding some schools in affected areas, like closing those schools. But I think that was more around direct fire risk, because it was in the big holidays. They just advised people to stay inside, especially if you had asthma or any sort of lung condition.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that galvanized Australian public opinion that, hello, this is not some kind of liberal, radical issue, it affects us?
Yeah, this question, I've asked this question a lot, and I don't know that I have a super convincing answer. I definitely think it changed people's minds, and I definitely think, especially in urban Sydney, where even if there is huge fires, where our houses aren't going to burn down, because we did have this direct impact on literally people in Sydney. I think it did make people angry, and it potentially made people more aware. But my fear is that may go away for people who weren't directly hit. So if your house burnt down or you had to evacuate or your area is burnt, you will never, ever forget that. But I'm not sure that people will remember how bad it really was, and that people will stay energized. There was some big rallies held in Sydney, and at the time of the fires, we just spontaneously got, I think, 40,000 people. The other week, there was a almost identical rally, and it only had 10,000 people. And I just wonder if people are forgetting and have gone back to their old lives.
I live near what's called the Camp Fire in Northern California, where the town of Paradise was mostly burned down. And people that I run into whose houses were burned down, they're still traumatized. I mean, I had no idea how devastating it is to have your everything you own burned. I mean, it's only material, but it's huge. It's your nest. To have it go is so traumatic.
Yeah, definitely. I have a friend whose house burnt down, and I mean, I don't know what she's feeling inside, but I feel that she's still coming to terms with it, even though it was quite a while ago. And yeah, you also the fear of having to evacuate, the fear of potentially not getting out, the fear of your family members not getting out, people you know, that's really traumatic, and I don't think you ever, ever, ever forget that.
Right. That was the problem here is the road out of Paradise was just 2 lanes, and people were stuck in their cars with flames around them because there was no movement. I mean, I can't think of anything more traumatic than that. Somebody who had to get out and run.
Yeah, the footage that has come out of people who had to drive through those situations is horrific. Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would be like.
No. So the government has traditionally been in denial of human influence on climate change, and coal is what, a third of our energy output or whatever. We love coal. We're going to build this big new coal mine. So did the government change at all because of the big bushfires, or they're still in the camp of coal?
They're still very much in the camp of coal. I feel that perhaps at first they changed absolutely nothing. They continued with their kind of denying rhetoric or whatever. But they got Scott Morris in particular got a lot of criticism for his response, particularly that he went on a holiday to Hawaii in the middle of the fires. 2 firefighters died while he was sitting on a beach, and so that definitely he got a lot of criticism for that. But I think ultimately nothing much changed. They may have changed a little bit of their sort of rhetoric, but the focus. The problem was there was a lot of conspiracy theories. People blaming the Greens. People blaming arsonists.
It's deliberate. The Greens set the fire so that there would be coal awareness.
It was more that the Greens, this kind of story started that the Greens had prevented the government from engaging in backburning and hazard reduction.
Oh.
And as a result, we know our land, we should be allowed to burn it in protection of, future fires, whatever. Fire commissions came out and were just like, this is complete nonsense. Firstly, the Greens are not in power at all. Secondly, that's not how backburning works. Governments don't decide when to backburn. The RFS decide when to backburn. The only impact, if any, on the amount of backburning that occurred was due to the drought. So they have to have risk assessments around backburning, because otherwise backburning can turn into its own fire. And our winter was so short, dry, and hot that the amount of backburning that was able to occur was potentially less. But it just wasn't what happened. But this was sold to people mostly by the Murdoch press, and a lot of people were convinced by it. Same with the arsonist story, saying that it was all arsonists, random numbers being thrown around. It wasn't.
Even if it was started by an arsonist, it wouldn't have spread so wildly if there weren't these climatic changes.
Precisely. And yeah, I think that created a lot of confusion in public opinion and prevented the real impact from being able to hit home, I suppose.
I don't know if you've heard Trump's remedy, which is that like you should be like the Norwegians and sweep the forests.
Yeah.
So Norwegians got out there and started sweeping their forests for their YouTube channel or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. I think everyone was in disbelief.
It's amazing what comes out of that man's mouth. He says this whole coronavirus, it could disappear like a miracle.
Oh my god. No, yeah.
It could be gone by April. Who knows? Oh my goodness. So what is it? When is the next big election? When will Morrison and his party be up again? And do you have any hopes that they'll be ousted?
So we only had an election last year, and so pretty much just before the fires began in May, and so we still have 2 years until another election can occur, and that's a long time. Firstly, I mean, a lot of damage can be done in that time regarding climate, and also. Maybe I'm pessimistic, but I'm not convinced that the opposition have identified what is going to win them an election. They recently came out in support. Because during the election, also their policy or lack thereof, and their kind of rhetoric around climate was very confusing. They sort of tried to make themselves a small target, I suppose. And so they don't have a clear kind of opposing position, which makes things difficult. And recently an independent came out with a bill to be discussed or debated, which is a 2050 net zero by 2050 bill that has no kind of short-term goals in it. It just basically says net zero by 2050. And Labor have come out in support of this bill. The Liberals have come out not in support of this bill. The Greens have come out not in support of this bill. And so there's just a little bit of confusion around climate policy in Australia right now. And also, coal is a very kind of sensitive topic. And so Labor have come out and said that they still support coal even beyond 2050, because they, I think, consider net to be the important word in that policy. So their argument, I suppose, is that net zero means you can still export coal. But I don't think physics really works like that.
Australia it's like a third of the energy comes from coal or something, or that it's a third of the exports, or what's the statistic around the importance of coal?
I'm not sure about the exact statistic. Definitely export-wise, we are in the top 3, I believe, of coal exports in the world. But I also, for some reason, coal has kind of been given this sort of sacred cushioning. Anyone says anything about coal and the whole country seems to become outraged instantly. And I'm not exactly sure why.
Because there's so much money involved, that's why.
Yeah, I suppose so. But it's just, it's a lot of money, but I mean, it's killing our planet. Yes. I think, the other issue comes around with coal exports is that personally I view us as being responsible for those emissions. But I think on a kind of accounting kind of way of looking at things, if we export coal to somebody and they burn it, the emissions are given to them.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that's kind of ridiculous, because if we didn't dig up and export the coal, the emissions wouldn't be in the air.
Right. So what organizations have you gravitated to in terms of your activism for the environment?
So I was very, I guess, motivated to act by the Fridays for Future movement, because I really liked the idea of constant, I guess, that constant presence every Friday. I think big strikes are really important. They get a lot of media. They get that sort of wow factor. But I think that consistent presence on the footpath is almost more important. And so I started striking on my own, because there was no one else in Sydney who was striking every Friday. So I literally just made a sign and went to the CBD and sat on the floor on my own.
What's CBD?
Central Business District, so the city centre of Sydney.
You were the first one to do Fridays for Future in all of Australia?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, definitely in Sydney. I'm not aware of anybody else in Australia either. So I went on my own because no one wanted to join me.
Were you in high school then?
I had just finished high school. And so, was I? No, I started uni. Yeah, I'd started first year uni. No one really wanted to join me. So, and I guess that was what I liked so much about the movement, is that you don't need permission from anyone. You don't need to be accepted by an organization. You don't need to be chosen as, I don't know, leader of the future or something. You can make a sign and you can go and sit on the pavement on your own. But sitting on your own is a tad lonely, and I wanted to see if people wanted to do it who I didn't already know. So I created Fridays for Future Sydney, and in line with the other international groups under Fridays for Future. And now we have somewhere between 3 to 8 people each week who strike as part of Fridays for Future Sydney.
And what kind of comments do you get from passerbys?
A lot of very negative comments.
Really? Like what that you can say?
We do get positive comments as well, but I guess a lot of them are negative. We get a lot of go back to school, a lot of swearing at us, a lot of people telling us they're brainwashed. A lot of people, who don't really have an argument but just want to yell something abusive, or people who come up and are climate deniers and say that we're being brainwashed by, anti-capitalists, or that people who say that Australia is so reliant on coal and fossil fuels that we're trying to condemn everybody to a life of no electricity and mud huts or whatever.
Mud huts.
Yes. We get quite a lot of negative comments, which can be sometimes quite confronting, but I guess that's why we're there. Because we wouldn't be there if everybody agreed and everyone was in unity with one another. We wouldn't have to be doing this. So, but yeah, it does get a bit tiring trying to argue or discuss with people who seem to have no appreciation for facts and are happy to make up statistics or make up arguments just on the spot. We do get positive comments too, of course. It's not all negative. We do get people who are supportive and, give us encouragement, which is good.
Do the encouraging ones tend to be younger or not?
No, not necessarily. We definitely get people who, a lot of older people. I guess it's also we're there during the day on a Friday. So in general, I think the demographic of people walking past us is probably slightly older, because more people in school, work, whatever. But we definitely get encouragement from people of all ages.
What's your strategy if somebody goes by, cuss, 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 cuss? do you ignore it? Do you smile and wave, or what's your strategy for the negative ones?
So most people who are negative don't want to engage in conversation.
Oh,
They tend to say it, walk rather quickly, and say it as they're just to the side of us or slightly behind us.
oh,
Which is
chicken.
something, it's a kind of a technique we've noticed because it happens so often. With those people, we normally kind of look at each other and laugh and then shake our heads. Um, the people who come up to us and actually engage but are negative, who are swearing at us or saying we're brainwashing, etc., we normally try and engage them in statistics and kind of to counter their belief that no one actually supports this, that it's a hoax, or questioning the kind of reliability of their argument and asking them why they believe it, and just keep on asking why. But I'm not convinced that it's necessarily the most successful strategy, just because most of these people do not seem to have any. They're not interested in facts, and they're not interested in reasoning with us. They sort of want to just abuse us and then walk off. At some point, they do walk off.
Do you have like fact sheets or anything to hand out to people who say, I'd like to know more about this?
Yeah, we've started handing out flyers, but then I think we're going to revise the content of our flyers because we got some feedback that potentially the language was too confusing and too scientific, and that we should. I mean, we spoke about carbon budgets on our flyer, and yeah, I guess to someone who's so in the movement and so in the kind of world of climate activism, that seems like a really simple sort of thing. But I guess to someone who's not as knowledge, like not in this sort of world and hasn't read so much about it, it can kind of go over their head a little bit. So I think we're working on trying to simplify our message a little bit on the kind of climate science facts side of things.
Yeah, I know that the Greta's main theme is listen to the scientists, listen to the scientists, listen to the scientists.
Yeah. And we say that a lot. I guess people then ask, well, what are the scientists saying and what do we need to do? And we try and emphasize that we are not politicians. We're not experts in public policy. We are not, we're not trying, yeah, we're just trying to alert people to the science and get government to act on the science. We're not telling them what their policy should. We're not telling them precisely their actions or what exactly a policy should look like. We're telling them it needs to be in line with this scientific consensus. Otherwise, it's not good enough.
Right. What do you have meetings virtually or in person? I mean, how do you organize Fridays for Future in Sydney?
So we are currently organising meetings that we want to have in person, so that people who maybe hear about us but are nervous to rock up with people they've never met and sit on the street for 4 hours, so that they can sort of have an entry point, and also so we can discuss things. Right now, it's quite a small group, so we normally do our discussions while we're striking. So we discuss our plans and make decisions while we're striking. I suppose it's kind of convenient. We're all by definition there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's normally how. But we are definitely looking to organise physical meetings that are outside of the strikes themselves.
And of the 6 to 8 regulars, how many are young women?
I would say that our regulars, there's probably 5 regulars, and 3 of us, or actually 6 6 regulars. 3 of us are young women in high school or uni, and of the other 3, 2 of them are also women. One who is 87 and one who is in her 20s. So we are definitely predominantly women and also young women.
And so there's one male identified person in the group.
Yes, who comes every week.
And
Yes.
is he in high school or uni?
He's in high school.
And you know what's been really interesting to me is one of the women that I interviewed said that in high school it's not cool to be an activist, and that to be. So I said, well, what's cool for a guy? It's to be a musician or an athlete or something like a jock, we say. So do you think that's a factor? And how does this guy get around the not cool factor? Because to me, it's the coolest thing in the world to be an activist, but maybe not in high school.
So I guess he's a kind of, yeah, maybe fits into your theory, which is he's homeschooled.
Oh.
So he's not in the kind of world of the competition of trying to be cool in high school, I suppose, because he's homeschooled. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why it's so female dominated.
It
I
is around
guess,
the world.
yeah, and it's definitely something I've noticed. It's not just here, it's everywhere. And I guess when I was thinking about it, I sort of tried to think, well, why did I join? And maybe that's kind of there's a similar reasoning for other young girls. And the reason why I joined the movement rather than just being personally kind of interested in climate is because I felt that I didn't have to ask anybody. I didn't have to apply. I didn't have to go through a leadership organization. I didn't need to be a school prefect. I didn't need to have already been in any sort of leadership role, and I didn't need to ask anybody. I didn't need to be included by anybody. I could just go and do it myself. And I think there is also something that I've noticed is that maybe not all, but a lot of people in the movement, activists around the world, feel a little bit slightly on the outside, perhaps, and not in the kind of traditional cool roles in like uni or high school. And so maybe that's something that's drawing people to the movement, is it if they haven't always felt that they're like that they would be included, or that if they applied for a leadership role that they would get it. Here they don't need to do that.
But I guess kind of the extreme of that is the people on the autism spectrum in Sweden. The
Yeah,
number of
definitely.
them. Yeah. So how interesting. Um, what? But just to finish with this coolness thought, why is it okay for girls to do something uncool, but it's not as okay for boys? There's more pressure on boys to fit in or prove their masculinity or something.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Maybe it's, yeah, that the things that are seen to be cool for a guy to be doing don't fit into the activist kind of image. Whereas there is perhaps for girls, it can be kind of cool to be, be seen as like a leader, standing up for stuff, or that might also drive girls the idea that you don't always have access to leadership. And so kind of taking that with your own two hands and loudly putting your voice out there to almost counter that in the kind of real world, I suppose. The majority of people holding leadership positions are men. And so it may be a wish to kind of counter that. And whereas maybe guys don't feel that pressure to counter that because their voice is already sort of being heard, and as a result, maybe that's not fitting into the image of being a cool guy, whereas it might fit better into the image of being a kind of a strong girl.
Interesting. Wait, is it when I think of high school in the States, it's one of the most segregated places that any on any live stage. There's the athletes, there's the theater people, there's the emo people, there's the preppies, or do you have those similar kind of groupings in at least in your high school that you were aware of?
I think, yeah, people definitely self group or are forced into grouping themselves. I guess I don't know. I've never been to an American high school, so I don't really know to compare them but I know definitely, in American television or something, it's something that's very kind of almost cliched, I guess, the like very stereotypical kind of lunchtime American high school kind of
Yeah,
image where everyone's divided up.
yeah.
I I don't know that it's that as strong maybe in Australia, but it's definitely there. People definitely group based on interest or what they would like to be interested in, or I guess their sort of image from how they're viewed by other people. I mean, we definitely have groups that would be defined as, I don't know, the more popular group, sportier group, more academic group, or whatever. Um, yeah.
So what are the groups that you would like if you went back to visit your high school at lunch? Who would you see eating together in groups?
Um, yeah. I suppose there's definitely um, people who group themselves when they don't feel as included by other people, and they often would group themselves together to kind of find support in that. I guess the kind of groups of people who, would find themselves as leaders or prefects or etc. like that, they would probably group themselves. Um, yeah, I guess by similar interests. I mean, there's definitely groups of boys who are into sport, that sort of thing. But I don't know if it would be as easy to find these very kind of clear titles. I think there is a reason why the groups are formed, but I wouldn't be able to label them maybe as clearly as perhaps you are able to in the US.
Yeah, because they wear different clothes. You know,
Yes.
even if you go to the university, the Aggies will wear certain kind of shoes and Levi's and a cowboy hat, and the drama people will have big eye makeup or something. Except that that's hardly not true anymore, because now every girl, every young woman wears tights and a t-shirt or a sweatshirt. Everybody's in tights. So I don't. It's changed.
Yeah, I guess in Australia in high school we have uniforms, so that I guess takes away kind of prevents some of the kind of labeling of
Yeah.
groups and the kind of very specific definitions that you could give to a group.
Right. Right. So do you think of yourself as a feminist?
Yeah, yes, yes. Um, I wouldn't say that. Yes, well, of course. I mean, I'm very like I think it's one of the most important things. I especially around just in leadership positions in sport. Equal pay, equal representation, all of these things I think is really important. I guess it's not a word that I necessarily use to label myself with, but I definitely, I'm very, I don't like the word passionate, but I care a lot about it. Yeah.
Why was your first a questioning infection? It was yeah.
Um, just because I think a lot of people do more in that space than I do.
Oh,
Um, I guess so much of my focus is on climate right now that I feel like it's sort of like someone saying I don't know.
I know what you mean.
Um, yeah, I guess my initial thought, I'm thinking it back through, maybe this is not the right thing to say, but I guess my initial thought was that um, I kind of identify more as someone involved in climate. But I think everyone, when I'm thinking it back through my head, anyone who cares about um, equity, equality, and women's rights should identify themselves as feminists.
Okay. Why do you think your generation Z is so articulate outspoken. I mean, there's activists who started climate activism when they were 11 or 9 or whatever. That I don't know of any time in history when people have been so young and so active. What do you think the explanation is?
I think firstly, I mean, most of this credit has to go to Greta Thunberg. I think that she, as a young person, she devised this entire climate striking movement, and I think motivated people who were her age, older, but also younger, to use their voice in that particular way. But I guess also maybe, I mean, maybe young people or children are kind of given more agency or control over their actions and time in that sort of way. I guess, yeah, like there's a more kind of focus on getting people, young people, engaged in, yeah, things like feminism or politics, or, and I guess in this case, climate, and maybe that sort of thing. I mean, maybe in schools, if people are, you're kind of told about these issues and, how it's important to fight for these kind of issues and stuff, that maybe once people have seen someone like Greta use her voice as a young person, they think, why can't I do exactly the same?
Do you think
Yeah.
it could happen without social media, or is that a necessary part of the equation of young activism?
Um, I don't know. I don't think it could absolutely not happen, but it's definitely facilitated the kind of growing of this global movement. And because, I mean, I speak with lots of people who are also activists all over the world, and I'd never be able to do that without social media. I wouldn't even know they existed, probably. I think also without social media, to get to kind of show what you're doing, or for people to see it and then join to create a movement, you need the traditional media to care enough or be engaged enough to photograph you or film you or interview you or something like this, to get yourself out there. Whereas now anyone can log on to Instagram or Twitter or any of these platforms, create an account, and almost have their own media where they can, for themselves almost, where they can show what they're doing and other people can see it. And I think that's been enormously important in spreading it, because otherwise I would never have known that it was happening. I mean, some girl sitting in Stockholm, like, most people wouldn't even know it was happening if she wasn't able to put it on social media and the whole world could see it. And also, I think it's been really important from a kind of support standpoint. I think in the traditional media, it's sort of been it's sort of been publicized as, all the youth rise up or something. But I don't think it's actually like that. I think it's a very small minority of youth. And it seems great when you see a strike of 80,000 people, but I mean, there's a lot of people in the world. That's only a tiny fraction. And so most of us don't know other people, or only know a few people perhaps that we strike with, who care about the issue like we do and are doing the same thing. And so it's been amazing to be able to talk with people in other places who are doing the same thing as I am, from that support standpoint as well.
And then what platforms do you use? Are you just like casually on Instagram and Twitter, or are there like chat times, or how is it structured, this communication internationally?
So I use Twitter the most. A lot of climate activism happens on Twitter. And that was where I found out about, I do this campaign around the Congo Rainforest. And so that was where I found out about that. And so basically maybe 12 or so people, maybe there's more, around the world, we do these daily strikes for the Congo Rainforest. And so we communicate through Twitter. We're not trying to coordinate in the sense of time-wise or anything like that, but we, I don't know, provide support to each other, talk to each other, try and raise awareness about the Congo Rainforest together. Instagram is used, but I think Twitter, the kind of nature of Twitter is a sort of collaborative discussion that happens on Twitter because with comments and threads, and you can kind of engage people more. I think Instagram is used more to present something. So I think, yeah, I use Twitter the most. But when we're organising international strikes that are coordinated between different countries or whatever, then we actually physically talk. So we use things like Zoom and Slack and these kind of messaging platforms to communicate.
And when you're on an international Zoom group conference, like roughly how many people would be on it?
So I'm not in any of the kind of international Fridays for Future working groups. I've never been on a call with Fridays for Future, but I'm part of a group called Polluters Out, a relatively new group that's an international group aimed at holding fossil fuel corporations specifically accountable. And when we do calls, we normally do calls by region. So everyone in the region will call, and then which is just like a handful of people, and then we have each region is represented by 2 people, and then we have international calls where, yeah, there's roughly 2 people from each region, purely because if we had hundreds of people on a call, it would go nowhere.
It'd be bedlam, yeah. And so you're one of the 2 from Australia, or from your region?
Yeah, from Australia, yes.
And so so roughly how many regions are represented? 2 from each region makes how many people?
So it sort of depends on the call, on the conversation. But we generally have Australia, the US, well, Northern America, we have Latin America. Europe is sometimes broken up so that the UK and some places have their own sort of representation. Sometimes someone from the Pacific Island nations come in, but there's also issues with like internet access and things like that. So a lot of the discussions happen just purely by messaging, which is slow, but it means that we don't need to find one time where people internationally are available.
And of those people, the leaders, roughly what percent are female?
Oh, I don't know. I don't really like the word leaders because I don't like hierarchy. But I'm not sure. Definitely the 3 founders of Polluters Out are all female. In Australia region, of the people who, like the 3 most active people in our region are both female. Yeah, like I would say the majority are female.
Mm-hmm. And the second wave of the women's movement struggled with that issue of hierarchy and leaders and leaderlessness and that kind of thing. And what they kind of came up with is there are natural hierarchies. There are people who are skilled in something. This person's good at public speaking. This person does this. So it's better to acknowledge that there are hierarchies than to pretend they don't exist, and then things go on underneath the surface. So I guess my question is, how do you get things done without some kind of leadership hierarchy?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. With Fridays for Future, we're such a small group that we don't need any leadership or hierarchy. We just all discuss.
It's consensus.
We just some sort of consensus forms, and we just agree on something, or if we don't agree, we work through that. There's absolutely no need for any sort of leadership or anyone who's more important than anybody else. I suppose when you get to international discussions, you do need some sort of way of getting things done when there's a lot of people involved. But I think we're trying to move away from not use the words of a region's leader, but more just their external coordinator to represent what's being discussed on. And I guess it's also sort of been more defined by who has the time as well, and who we're all kind of juggling lots of things. So who wants to commit to this particular battle, I suppose. I think some groups, I guess I'm not in groups internationally that I don't know how they do it in, I don't know, Berlin or Moscow, like wherever. I don't know how they organize them, but I think I'm very conscious, especially as Fridays for Future, as we hopefully grow bigger, that we don't create any feeling that certain people are more important than others, or that certain people are considered leaders, or and other people are just considered kind of foot soldiers. I don't think that's what this movement is about, and I don't think, of course, you need to get the stuff done, but I think it's really important to make people feel that every person's opinion is equally important, and that there's no one leading the movement, leading the group, because that's exactly what I didn't like about a lot of other things in high school or leadership programs or these sorts of things. That's exactly what I didn't like. So I try to be conscious of not recreating that.
That it's really a major issue. Is how do you have order, structure, accountability, planning, and not recreate a military hierarchy, a yes ma'am, no ma'am kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's always been an issue, I think, in liberal groups, in activist groups.
Yeah, and I think also you want to feel very open to people trying to join your group as well. If it seems like you need to get the approval of certain people or anything like that, I think you're headed in the wrong direction.
So do you get new people for Fridays for Future Sydney from Instagram or Twitter?
We have had people who've seen us on social media and come joined us or said hello. The only problem that does arise, I guess, from social media is that people who engage with it from all around the world. So even if you have hundreds or thousands of followers, there's no, they could be from all parts of the world where they can't physically join you. But yeah, we have had some people. I mean, I started on my own, and through social media, I've managed to get this number of people. So it's definitely possible. Yeah.
How many Twitter followers they call it, right? How many followers do you have on Twitter?
Personally, or the Fridays for Future group?
Both.
Oh, okay. Fridays for Future group, I think we have 900 and something followers. And personally, I have 1,800 and something followers.
Oh, that's a big platform.
Yes, but I think a lot of people have a much bigger platform than I.
Whose platform is biggest? Oh, that's wild. So are you hopeful or pessimistic about the future of climate activism? I mean, with people like Bolsonaro in Brazil and Trump in the US, it's very discouraging. But do you have hope nevertheless?
Yes, I think I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it was possible. But I have to say that it's very demoralizing every time someone like that, or even Scott Morrison in Australia, just so kind of quickly dismiss all concern, and not only dismiss concern, actively engage in lobbying for fossil fuel companies, and that's enormously frustrating. And
give them huge subsidies, tax
of course,
breaks
yes,
and stuff.
yeah. And I mean, we recently in Australia, the Norwegian oil company Equinor pulled out of plans to drill for oil in the Great Australian Bight, and I think that renewed a lot of people's motivation and optimism. Not because it's a small win, a very small win, and we have to do that hundreds of thousands of times over to actually get any change. But I think there was a bit of a feeling of, is anything actually going to come of this? But I think I couldn't possibly look myself in the eye later if I hadn't done what I could. yeah, I don't know if I feel optimistic or not. It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. I read somewhere that Trump at a recent conference said, "Oh, I'm an environmentalist." I mean, he claimed it because now it's a big issue in the U.S. presidential elections in a way that it hasn't been before. People are aware in a way, so he's an environmentalist now.
Yeah, it was like Rupert Murdoch came out a while ago and said, "Oh, there are no climate deniers in our media," which
Really?
was a completely bizarre sense, like just made absolutely no sense because you read the newspaper that the Murdoch press print and it is just constant climate denialism. And yes, I mean, what? I think it's almost like denying that you're a climate denier, but continuing to be a climate denier. And I guess that's them trying to adjust to changing opinions without actually having to change any actions wise. And I think that's a lot to do with the 2050 bill in Australia, which is 2050 is a long time away, and it's very easy to do nothing until 2029 and then go, oh no, and hope that no one's remembered that you have a policy that talks about 2050. And that's why I am so unhappy with the bill.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just purely to be able to tell people that you're acting on climate while continuing to pretend and never actually do anything. And still, the Liberal Party don't even support that. So it's kind of incredible. They won't even support pretending to not do anything. They want to actually say they're not doing anything. It's quite bizarre.
What's the status of the proposed new, what is it, Asante, the big coal mine?
Adani?
Adani.
Yeah. So that is still currently being fought very strongly. It's in the works, but yeah, we're still working really hard, and there's people up at the site as well who are doing amazing work, tying themselves to things, blockading things, risking arrest, etc. They're doing really amazing work. The problem is, if you mention Adani, people just yell, jobs, 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 jobs. We're all going to lose our jobs, and we're all going to, oh my God, the whole world's going to, Australia's going to be back in the Stone Age. Oh, we need to go. Even though Adani have not committed to any number of jobs, most of it's going to be automated. But getting that through to people is really difficult. And as soon as you say Adani, people panic.
So, what is it like? How huge a carbon imprint would it have? If how much coal are they planning on taking out? What's the scope?
Enormous. I read an article, and a lot of it has gone out of my head, so I'm not going to quote any statistics. But basically saying that if the Adani mine really does dig up all the coal it plans to, oh hello. So cute. If Adani really does dig up all the coal that it plans to, it severely puts 1.5 target at risk globally. There's also the two other things. One, which is water. So Australia is in drought, has been for a while. There are cities that literally are trucking in water. And Adani, I think I should come back with the precise quote. I will come back with the exact one, but I believe it's something on the order of 12 billion litres of water a year every year till 2080.
Wow.
That it is going to take, and it's been prioritised above people's drinking water, which is insane. And also the fact that it's known as the Adani Carmichael mine, and that sort of basin of that area, if Adani fully goes through and becomes an operating mine, it makes it very easy for other nearby mines to be opened and approved. So it's sort of seen as like, I guess, a wedge where whoever wins this gets further, either we are more likely to prevent the other mines from opening, but if it does go ahead, those mines are more likely to be opened. And it's on Indigenous land, and they're going to be shipping out of the Great Barrier Reef, and there's just so many things. Yeah.
The good news is the Indigenous people, the First Nation people in Canada, you may have read, stopped the pipeline there.
Yes.
That's encouraging.
Yes, that was just incredible to see. The images that were coming out of Canada were amazing. There's just no consideration in Australia for Indigenous land at all. Zero consideration.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. It's insane. And there's just not that many jobs in it. We've lost more jobs in tourism and other ththings from the fires than we would ever get in Adani.
Hello.
I don't understand. I really don't understand.
I guess what it signifies the power of lobbying, organized, wealthy lobby interest groups, the control they have on government all over the world. They know how to manipulate.
Yeah. And they've managed to convince a large number of people in Australia that we need this mine. Yeah.
You said you got interested in the Congo Rainforest on Twitter. Do you know Helen Jackson in Scotland?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to interview her later.
Oh, fantastic. She's wonderful.
So what are you doing there, and why the Congo?
So there's a climate activist in Uganda named Vanessa Nakate. I'm not sure if you've heard of her.
I have.
She was the one, who was cropped out of the photo in Divorce Famously.
Mm-hmm.
And so quite a while ago, she started this campaign of daily strikes, so a short daily strike every day, around the Congo Rainforest. And her reasoning for this was that, firstly, Africa as an entire continent are already being hit enormously by the climate crisis. And there's barely any media around it, I suppose. I mean, Australia was terrible, really, really, really terrible. But we did swallow up a lot of media attention, international media attention, and people are dying all over Africa, and barely anyone says anything. So there was a feeling of being extremely left behind and no one considering her entire continent. Also because the majority of people are very poor, and so they're contributing virtually nothing to the crisis, and they're the first ones to feel the hit of it. And so that was her aim, was raising awareness for the entire continent of Africa. But the Congo rainforest is the largest rainforest in Africa. It's the second largest rainforest in the world, and most people have not heard of it. And recently, some scientists in a university in the US, I want to say Maryland, but I'm not 100% sure, did some research in the Congo, and they said at current rate of deforestation or expected rate of deforestation, the entire primary Congo rainforest could be gone by 2100. And of course, the Amazon is so important. And this campaign isn't to take away from that, but it's very important that we realize the impact that we're having on Africa and people in Africa. And also, as one of the lungs of the world, we all need the Congo rainforest.
So your goal is mainly to be informative, to let people know about the problem.
Yes, I think to raise awareness, because the problem with, this is also an issue that we're kind of grappling with as a group, which is what sort of is our end goal and how are we going to achieve it? And beyond raising awareness, how do we actually get action? It's quite difficult. But raising awareness so it's something people are aware of, and because a lot of the companies that are responsible, it's really hard to find because it's such a remote area. It's really hard to find who precisely is responsible for this deforestation, for this logging. A lot of it is also will be written down accounting wise as as locals, kind of small scale subsistence farming, but often it's a cover for a large organization. And also because activism is quite dangerous in a lot of parts of the Congo. So we have a guy called Remy Zahiga, and he's from Democratic Republic of the Congo, and who was a sort of co-founder of this movement. And he is not always able to strike or able to put it on social media because of safety issues and because of internet issues. So we're also trying to, raise awareness for people who don't have the like they're not able to do that for themselves.
Well, to change the subject, how did your parents feel when you were the only one sitting in downtown Sydney with your cardboard sign? Were they like, oh my goodness, or were they yay, or what was their attitude?
They were pretty supportive.
Okay.
They were supportive. Even though, I was on my own and stuff. They didn't think it was such a crazy idea, I guess, because they saw people around the world doing the same thing as me. Maybe it would have been a bit different for Greta's parents when she was trying to do this and no one was doing it. That's I guess a much bigger thing. People were already doing it, so they were supportive.
That's really helpful. So where do you see yourself 5 years from now? You'll be graduated from uni and doing what?
I really don't know, actually. I don't know what I want to do in the future as a career. But I guess from a climate standpoint, there's kind of two potential images. One is that the whole world has woken up to this crisis and we are no longer striking and we have true action, which would be incredible. But I also often have this thought, which is how long will we be doing this for? Because I personally have no plans to stop until we do have real action. And so that could be a very far off date. And so I guess, there's nothing to say that I won't be still striking on Fridays in 5 years' time.
So your future employer will have to know that there's... I have responsibilities on the street every Friday. Oh my goodness.
Yes. I do have this kind of image of on my Fridays kind of like chalked off of my calendar for like 10 years. I don't know.
Is there anything else that you think people should know about in terms of being an effective organizer, really being able to make change in a way that's democratic? Anything that we haven't talked about that you think is essential?
I think I guess we spoke about being a kind of very transparent group. I think it's important that people don't feel that they need the approval of anybody in the group, and that they feel that they're just as important as everybody. Even if you have thousands of strikers, I think every single person should feel that they're the same. But I guess we're quite a small group, and so we're trying to learn from other groups as to how to build the group. We've sort of plateaued a little bit. There was like quite a lot of growth, and then we've plateaued numbers-wise a bit. And so I'm not sure that I have any good advice. I'm trying to get good advice from other people who have been able to grow beyond the sort of number of like 5, 6 sort of people.
How were you able to organize 80,000 people to show up for the strike?
So I'm not so the group that organizes those mass strikes, I'm not part of that group. They don't strike every Friday. They only organize these large rallies. And I guess we don't really, we're working on a formal relationship, I guess, with them.
What's their name?
School Strike for Climate. They get lots of people, which is really great. I guess that I feel they've gone more down the route of a organization-based system. I think they do have hierarchies, and they've kind of organized themselves in that sort of a way. And I'm not sure like how they came to that decision or what exactly drove them to choose that sort of method. yeah, so that they're quite they do have hierarchies, and they do have um, leaders, for want of a better word.
And are most of them women, young women, do you think?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
And
Far majority.
is that an international group or is that an Australian group?
That's an Australian group.
Got it.
So they're under the name of School Strike for Climate Australia,
Uh-huh.
often shortened to SS4C.
And what international groups do you look to as they're making a difference?
Definitely Fridays for Future in Germany. I would say I'm most inspired by Fridays for Future in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Germany in general. Firstly, because they manage to mobilize enormous numbers of people every week. They get hundreds of people on the streets every week, which I am absolutely in awe of, and that is most definitely our goal, numbers wise. And also, I am enormously impressed by their ability to jump on every single issue with enthusiasm and presence. I mean, they were putting enormous amounts of work and continue to put enormous amounts of work into the Adani campaign because Siemens, which is a German company, and they are working with Adani. They're in the business of kind of signaling equipment. And there was a large campaign run primarily in Germany, primarily in Germany, but also partly in Australia, trying to get Siemens to pull out of the project because I guess it's been identified that if you can get all of their partners to pull out, then they can't go ahead. So, of course, Adani himself is going to build coal mines. That's what he does. But if we can pull everyone else out, he can't do that anymore because we're not going to convince him that it's a bad idea, or his company. And so, yeah, Germany put in amazing amounts of work. In particular, Louisa Neubauer, who's one of the main kind of prominent activists in Germany, put in just incredible work with the Siemens campaign, even though it's not the coal mine is not in Germany, and they're just one small cog. And so, yeah, that really amazes me. They're just on every issue all the time. Huge numbers of people. I don't know. I don't know if their school system is just really good. I don't know why, but they do really amazing work.
Any other international groups that you think are doing a good job for climate?
I think outside of Fridays for Future.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think, of course, there's groups that have been fighting the fight for a very long time. You know, groups like Greenpeace, Wilderness Society, these groups that predate school striking by decades. And they are doing really, of course, like essential work. Also, from this kind of more technical things like when Equinor was going to be drilling in Australia, the Wilderness Society was organising a legal battle around or a legal case around the NOPSEMA, which is the kind of environmental agency that gave them approval. So those sorts of actions are enormously important. And yeah, those groups do amazing work.
Internationally.
Yeah.
Where is Wilderness Society headquartered?
I don't know if it's only an Australian group. It may be only in Australia. I'm not sure if it's international or not.
Okay.
Yeah, but they do a lot of really good stuff.
I never hear of youth activists involved with Greenpeace, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening. Do you know of particular youth involvement with Greenpeace?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I guess they're a very large organization trying to juggle lots and lots of things. I'm not aware of any kind of youth-focused kind of branches or anything like that, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, me either. And then there's the group that starts with a Z that started in England that does a lot of street protests, and their name escaped me, but you'll know what it is.
Extinction Rebellion?
Yes.
Yes. Extinction Rebellion do lots of, especially in the UK, so much work. they just go. They are really, they've got quite a big presence in Australia, but not on the same level as the UK. Extinction Rebellion in the UK do so much work. And they do a lot in Australia. And I think this is also, of course, youth is important. And this kind of movement has been sparked by youth. But I think it's very incorrect to say that this is only youth, because Extinction Rebellion do so much, and most of them are not youth.
Yeah, good point. All right, thank you. Wait.